Hello, listener. Welcome to Belharra, the birth story of a biotech podcast. I'm Jeff Yonker, your host and the CEO of Belharra Therapeutics. So for anyone who's ever wondered how a scientific idea becomes a biotech company and then eventually produces a medicine or a platform that produces numerous medicines that ultimately impact the lives of many patients, we hope this podcast will bring you along for the early stages of that journey. We've decided to share our story as it unfolds, almost real time, to give you that under-the-hood kind of access. So in today's episode, we have the privilege of hearing from the extraordinary scientists, Chris Parker and John Teijaro. John and Chris are two of the co-founders of Belharra, along with Cravatt and Stuart Schreiber. Now, Ben and Stuart are legends in drug discovery, marquee names, having almost invented the field of chemical biology. They've seeded and founded multiple successful biotech companies over multiple decades, and both individually and together, and from work in their labs at the Scripps Research Institute and the Broad Institute. Unlike Ben and Stuart, this is Chris and John's first time as co-founders of a biotech company. So we thought it'd be fun to get the rookie perspective on how you do it. Chris and John will be telling the stories of their respective childhoods, growing up in the Rust Belt, their unique paths to getting their Ph.D.s, their serendipitous postdoc meetup at Scripps, and how their scientific curiosity and some good old-fashioned being in the right place at the right time led them to uncover the foundational concepts that led to the creation of Belharra. We'll also hear how they were courted by industry early on with some pretty tempting offers to acquire their technology, and how they ultimately decided to go forward and go big and form a company instead. So with that, let's talk with Chris and John. Chris, John, thanks for making time, and good to see you. Why don't you start out with just a little bit about who you are? So I'll pick on John first.
Yeah.
How'd you get to where you are, and tell us a little bit about what you do now?
Well, a lot of hard work. Always been interested in science since I was young, and never really knew whether I wanted to do medicine or certainly research. And then as I did more research in different labs, I got really interested in the research aspect of it and sort of solving problems that haven't been solved yet. Mm-hmm. And so went and did the Ph.D. Always had an interest in viruses, so we really had the virus-host interface, and then became more interested in immunology as time went on, and started really doing.
Because regular science wasn't easy enough. You really
immune system was really exciting. It was we were really learning a lot about the immune system at the time as I was coming through, checkpoint. The beginnings of checkpoint had happened, and understanding negative regulation, and so a lot of really exciting happenings were happening in immunology, and so you kind of gravitate towards that. Mm-hmm. So I gravitated towards that, and then did my PhD at University of Maryland, working on T cells. Moved to Scripps, working with one of the biggest names in viral pathogenesis, and then one of the other big names in drug discovery, Mike Oldstone in pathogenesis, and Hugh Rosen, where it really got me into using chemical probes to study biology. And from there, did a postdoc, got connected with Ben Cravatt, and then Chris was in Ben's lab. Mm-hmm. So him and I started talking because we're from the Rust Belt, both of us. So we had a similar kind of feel for how we approach things in life and stuff like that, and so similar humor style. So we started talking about things that we could do, behind the scenes, not telling our mentors about. And
skunk work's always a good game plan.
And so we did it. I mean, I was interested in certain cell types that were hard to get, and he had a number of probes that sort of a platform he was developing that was conducive to that. Yeah. And so it just made sense to do. And so we had fun and we did it. And from my perspective, maybe he wouldn't have as much fun as I had.
But this is why we had you both on together.
I was having fun, and we kept doing it. And
we're going to go into a lot more detail, and so I'm going to pause you there. And so, Chris, tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of how you got where you are today.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having us. I grew up, as John mentioned, kind of in a Rust Belt as well. Parents didn't go to college or anything like that, but I worked. My dad's like a builder. I worked for builders and mechanics and things growing up, and so I always was interested in creating things, and chemistry kind of seemed like an outlet for that, at least on a molecular level. And so I kind of got hooked on chemistry in college, working in the old school total synthesis lab, learning how to make molecules and characterize them. But I was always making them just for the sake of making them, not really understanding the purpose of making them. And then I kind of heard of this whole chemical biology thing when I was thinking about graduate school. how you could rationally design molecules to actually carry out function. And so it kind of got me hooked on my path to graduate school. I went to Yale University, working for a brand new PI who was an MD, Ph.D., so sort of formally trained in organic chemistry, but also had the MD, so he had this really interesting insight of designing molecules really well to carry out biological function, and kind of got hooked. So in graduate school, I worked on a rationally designed set of molecules to redirect immune function to target proteins to HIV-infected cells and cancers, resulting in their immune clearance. And then I actually ran into Ben Cravatt. He was a speaker when I was a graduate student. I think I was a graduate student host or something. He's one of our co-founders. And learned about this technology that his lab does, and I thought that was great, but it was limited to, at the time, to 200 enzymes. And I asked him, what about everything else? And he said, well, apply to my lab for a postdoc. And I did. He was the only lab I applied to. And then, kind of entered his lab with this general concept in mind, and then things kind of took off from there.
So both of you come probably from places that haven't necessarily launched a lot of stellar scientific careers like yours. Tell me about your backgrounds and how that shaped kind of how you approach science today.
I mean, everything about my background suggests I shouldn't be in science today.
I wouldn't put it that way. But
so I come from a coal mining town
Yep.
in the Appalachian Mountains of Pennsylvania, which today, in the height of the 90s, there may be 4,000 or 5,000 people, and there's various towns around, and sports was a big deal.
Yep.
My dad was an athlete, and I played sports, but I also had this other interest that Dad maybe wasn't super excited about. He was an athlete, and he pushed. He didn't force me to do anything, but he made it very clear he valued that. He still does, but I don't think science was something he ever really thought about. So a lot of the you kind of, there's hard work. There's, these guys are athletes, and then they don't go to college, or maybe they do, and they get a degree, but they don't usually work in it, and they end up going to work in plumbing or driving truck, and so you kind of learn about hard work and the value of hard work, and not to buy more than you have, and spend more than you have, and they know how to live poor. They're old poor, not new poor, where they just credit card everything. So you just kind of learn, that's how I was raised. And so, and science was there, thank God, in high school, and I went to college, we were exposed. My uncle was an MD, so there was that to kind of look up to, but the science aspect was sort of, tucked far, far away in some corner that, you had to really go to access. So, that was but it was nice because learning about the hard work and that lifestyle helped me carry that into the science, which when you do science and it's 90% failure, there's no option. You have to work hard and be able to get up when you fail, because you fail a lot. And so, I think there's this sort of an amalgamation that was sort of the right mixture. Maybe somebody from the big city that lived in a nice house might not have had that. I can't guarantee that, but
well, it sounds like it's the hard work, but also just the being aware of the privilege of doing science, right? That wasn't something that came easily to you, right? Because you had to go hunt it down.
Yeah, I also came from a blue-collar background. My parents are entrepreneurs, but a small business. They repair fiberglass on boats. They have a marina on Lake Erie. But we always grew up in a country surrounded by people that didn't go to college, that did physical labor. My dad is hitting close to 70, and he's still doing physical hardcore labor just because he loves it, and he does. That's
what he does.
This is what he does.
Yeah.
And so that was the thing we looked up to growing up, and the values that were kind of embedded to us. That it's all on you. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. No one's going to give you anything if you work hard. There's things can be a meritocracy, and so that made me, working with my dad at the family company, and then working for the farmer down the street, made me realize I don't want to do physical labor.
Check that box.
I started working on this trucking excavation company right down the street. I rode my bike, as soon as I was legally allowed to work. Although I worked a little bit illegally, probably a little bit too, because I just wanted to get enough money to buy a car so I could drive to school.
Of course.
And so I worked on turbochargers, learned how to grease Kenworth semi trucks, and got to dig digits with excavators and stuff. But also working out in the weather, digging ditches by hand. A lot of dirty, hard work that just made me realize that I don't want to do this at all. But it still made me appreciate it. No one in my family has Ph.D.s or M.D.s or anything, and so this idea of graduate school, in the sciences at least, you get your Ph.D. and your tuition's paid for, and you get a stipend and health insurance. And I'm the only one in my family that went to an Ivy League or get a PhD or grad school period. And so when my dad found out that not only am I getting my PhD paid for, that I also get a salary on top of that and health insurance, they thought I did something special, and that this is like some special award or something. It wasn't. This is just, when you get to this phase, this is just what you're able to achieve, which is remarkable. And he sat me down in maybe a fewer words, but he's like, basically, don't screw this up.
You got a good gig now.
Yeah. They're paying you to get a PhD.
Yeah.
Don't screw this up.
Yeah, I think my parents said something on the same lines, but not that directly.
Yeah.
But it was sort of, wow, this is unusual and real to us.
Pretty special. Yeah.
But it was a common thing. I mean, It's
Yeah.
not like you can go to almost any grad school in the academic basic.
It's just a very foreign
sciences.
concept
Yeah.
for them.
Common in that.
For them, it was you pay to go to college.
In that pond, but
Yeah.
you both were landing somewhere that was uncommon. Each of your kind of postdoc plans. So you're just having lunch and start to talk about how this might be
was
an
in the parking
intersection
lot.
of immunology. Oh yeah, do it over a beer, I guess.
John tends to lurk around places. I don't know.
I'm glad you brought that up.
Lurk around.
We've been looking at managing that.
He was lurking around Ben's lab, working on other collaborations, and just, to his credit, he was one of the only immunologists at Scripps interested in breaking through the barrier of chemical biology and realizing the potential of chemistry to study immunology. And so he just started showing up at group meetings, learning more and more, asking questions, and then that naturally kind of spun out to ways in which, as postdocs, we were able to kind of do off the books collaborations.
Yeah.
It's a sign of a good mentor who just sort of doesn't prune these things off, because a lot of times, he's a co-founder now of this company. So.
Yeah, right. But there's an inherent curiosity in both of you. I mean, I've had the pleasure of getting to know you both. That's been one of the big upsides of getting involved in Belharra. But both of you are really, I mean, that's a characteristic I would just describe. Like you're chasing understanding of things. And so maybe put it this way. For the person that's not as versed in chemoproteomics or Belharra in particular, what was sort of the problem statement that you saw that sort of attracted you to what the other was doing, and what was it that you thought you might be able to accomplish with that? I'll let John start.
Well, for me, it was my interest because of a compound that we were working on, which is actually is a drug nowadays for MS and IBD. We found it was hitting a cell type that they didn't know it was hitting. Mm-hmm. And this cell type just happens to be really rare. Mm-hmm. It's hard to get large numbers of them. And so we were, I was painstakingly generating these cells, which happened to be a very important cell. And the question, at Scripps, at the time, it was sort of, okay, we have 1 million compound library we could screen, but you're never going to get enough cells to do 1 million compounds. So, the question was, well, these are gold mine cells. How do we get something useful out of them without moving into something that might not be as relevant? And so that's when I sort of met him and, having a discussion, and it just fit, right?
Yeah.
It was sort of a pretty easy.
Yeah. And you were sort of starting from that same place, Chris, of having had that initial conversation with Ben and saying, look, can we expand between these, these couple hundred proteins to a bigger world, right? A couple orders of magnitude greater. And so what did you hear in what John was asking that sort of opened up your mind and got you excited about working together?
Yeah, just, I think during that time, I remember it's right when CRISPR kind of came out. This is early, like 2011, 2012, when we started my postdoc. And, CRISPR being able to selectively edit any gene or knock out any gene was supposed to revolutionize our understanding, just like sequencing. Mm-hmm. And they're very useful tools, but, not everything requires a knockout, or not everything is amenable. Specifically, like immune cells aren't really amenable to these genetic alterations, primary immune cells and things like that. And so there's this, I feel like chemical biology it's always been around, but I feel like there was a sort of an identification emerging for chemical biology as a a way to robustly study biology with chemical tools. And this sort of self-realization, I think, as a field, connected really well with what Ben's lab has always done. Actually, Stuart too. Stuart has always, he's sort of the godfather of modern chemical biology, always trying to understand the biology of bioactive compounds and synthesize new biology into compounds. But it was sort of done by a case-by-case study. There wasn't a universal approach like CRISPR or sequencing for drug discovery or chemical probe discovery. Yeah. And so I feel like I was just kind of in the right moment at the time where you had this identification renaissance for chemical biology, led by one of our other co-founders, Stuart, and others in the field, and sort of more of a platform technologist like Ben, thinking about broad ways to discover chemical tools. And I was kind of at the center of it. And again, we had John lurking around, and I always had this background interest in immunology. And I think we understood at the time the power of chemical tools for to study and investigate immunology and the translation potential there. And so it was just a great mixing pot, and right, good timing, I'd say, to leverage all these things and kind of put it all together.
What is it that's unique about the way that you started doing chemoproteomics with your lab's platform that then became sort of the platform we're using at Belharra, relatively speaking to some of the other chemoproteomics platforms out there?
I would say, largely the field of chemical proteomics at the time was sort of Cravatt style of using covalent probes to mechanistically react with enzymes or with reactive residues on proteins. And typically this was limited to lysates and purified proteins. And the novelty was that not all proteins are enzymes and not all binding sites have nucleophilic residues conveniently placed near functional sites. And so, we kind of had to take a step back and understand what sort of probe type could we utilize to access the same kind of breadth that these robust platforms do, but independent of function or amino acid presence. And we turned to some old photochemistry that had been known since the 60s, honestly.
Yeah, right.
And just made the sort of the attachment group on the probe rather than relying on the protein. And this sort of gave us universal access to all binding pockets, independent of function or model system or things like that. And so, this was work started as a postdoc, and then in my own lab, I applied all over the country, actually all over the world for faculty positions, and had really compelling places, other offers at other places, other top-tier universities. But I think Scripps is really this special place where they really like doing translational biology and chemical biology. They're very supportive of startups and industrial collaborations, and realize that they kind of go hand in hand with the science, help drive the science. And so I stuck with Scripps, and this really allowed me to think more about translation potential and what do we need to do to make this a potential industrializable platform. And so we started looking at probe design, we started looking on the technology side and the mass spec side, what improvements we need to make there in order to robustify it to scale where we can scale.
Yeah. And one of the things that was important to you all, and I think, again, it fits back into the immunology, was doing these screens in whole cells and using the whole cell system to be able to kind of characterize those interactions, right, and getting to see where there may be actionable binding pockets on proteins. And so was that just intuitive from your standpoint, or a necessity, or was that the thing you said, we just have to figure out a way to do this?
From our perspective, in the biology side, you as you do this for many years, you kind of realize that these cells are operating in not only an enclosed space, but three-dimensional space, interacting with other things at all times. It's I forget the molar concentration of a cell, but it's extremely high of protein and other lipids and other molecules. So for me, it was just always just something that you've learned in biology, that this system's interacting very dynamically. And so it just made more sense to not break that up and try to assay it rather than let the proteins and the lipids and everything kind of interact naturally.
And it's interesting to me because if you take a look at all the components of the Belharra platform, which we just kind of touched on, in some ways there's no single piece that is totally novel or unanticipatable, right? But it was the combination of all of those and putting together for the first time and then proving it that started turning heads. And we have this mantra that we're still hopeful the data will completely support, but it's that we can see any binding pocket, any protein, any conformational state, any cell type, right? And so at that point, you really have taken the aperture to its widest, possible place, and that's what I think is so more remarkable about what we've been able to do with what you guys have built.
What you just described, which I hope we're as successful as this analogy, is the iPhone.
Yeah.
Everything was there. There was a camera, there was a phone, the internet. They just put it all in the same place.
Right. Yeah. In the right form.
Obviously, revolutionized everything. But,
Well, that is our goal, right?
I hope we get there.
Yeah, no, and I think in the same fashion, we want Belharra to be successful. We want to produce medicines for patients. We want to produce a platform that really does enable a lot of discovery. I think we even have a goal beyond that, which is we'll change the way that drug discovery is done in the industry. Right? We really do think this platform has that potential. So, so let's go back to the fun-filled days when this was all getting going. So you both mentioned early ambitions around chemistry and sort of that, and sort of about science. And what you didn't mention was company creating. Was that is that part of? Obviously, a place like Scripps has a huge legacy of company founding. As you said, you work in an environment that's very translational in its orientation, and you're in a place that has really become one of the big hubs of biotech. So was this all sort of a natural progression to say, hey, we've got this really cool platform, it's yielding results, it's beginning to work in our hands, we're finding targets, ligands, in sort of protein types and cell types people haven't been able to interrogate before. Let's go, now's the time, let's go make the company? Or was there a different story to how this came together?
No, I think it's much more spontaneous probably than that. Certainly a pipe dream to have a company someday, but never realized it would happen that quickly. I think it started when I was maybe first or second year of my independent lab, where we had been working with John on this protein that is an immunomodulatory protein that was discovered at Scripps and his lab and others at Scripps had kind of flushed out a lot of biology on, and we were really interested just to kind of test the robustness of the platform to go after these tough proteins and maybe be first in class. It's always like a chemical biologist's dream to be first in class chemical probe for a cool protein. And it belonged to a class of proteins I was naturally interested in anyway. And so, our labs working together had developed a first in class inhibitor for this protein. And I was just at a national conference, an ACS conference, American Chemical Society conference, presenting on some of our developments, which hadn't been published at all. And the next day, I had, 5 or 6 emails from some of the most major pharma companies on the planet saying, we really want to talk to you. I hadn't really appreciated the interest around this area of immunology. And so, it brought him into the loop. We started talking a little bit more, and once we realized the seriousness of it, we were getting, as we've talked with you before, double-digit million term sheet offers, which as second-year PI are just blows your hair back.
Yeah.
So at this point, I kind of went to Ben, who I often go to for big or small problems. He's a great supporter. I'm like, what do we do?
Right.
And he said, well, you'd be an idiot to, give this off to some company who's just going to squash it. This is he might not have used the word idiot, but you'd be foolish to give this off, hand this off to somewhere, to a pharma that might just squander it and not development. If we can go after targets like these, we can, with the platform, we can go after more than just this particular protein. And so that's when we started incubating ideas of how we could potentially start a company, and he obviously had connections with Versant and other VCs, and they didn't need to listen more than 10 minutes before I think they realized that they're there.
Yeah, and so this is one of the more interesting pieces of the story to my ear, and sort of to put a fine point on it. You all would have had a personal stake in the upfront money that would have come in had you licensed this program out to a company.
Yeah, we would have gone from poor assistant professors to millionaires pretty quickly.
So it was not an insignificant number. Yeah. And so pretty remarkable that you didn't take that path and they chose to sort of go in the different direction that you did, which was building a company for the long haul. And walk us through kind of what that decision process was, and how did you think about it?
You want to go and take
Sure.
that one?
Yeah, sure. It was kind of a completely different world for me. So you don't know what you don't know, and so it was just something I never really considered.
Yeah.
And it all happened very, very quickly. The whole new world kind of opened up. I was always on the periphery when, Ben and others started these companies, and I'm just a new assistant professor. We don't have anything robust enough for that. But then we started having real conversations with a number of investors and pharma companies, and I felt confident in the platform. I felt confident in some of our programs, and after those conversations, I as I mentioned before, I kind of accepted that there is something there, and having people like Ben in our corner being supportive, and him having access to people like Stuart and all these other, it just became a reality much more quickly.
Yeah.
And to Versant's credit, they have a lot of experience in platform companies, a lot of successes there. There's a perfect incubator space all ready to go here, right next door to us here in San Diego. So it just seems so easy to transition this into an incubator, and it worked out really well. They picked up speed quite quickly, and they took a big risk, and it paid out.
Yeah. Same thought process, or?
Yeah, I think part of this I think could be attributed to like our backgrounds. Not to go back to that, but I think we come from places where you don't see immediate gain. You're used to sort of working towards something and working hard to get there.
Yeah.
And so it was, I won't say it wasn't anxiety inducing to make a decision like that.
You ended up in the hospital.
I ended up in the hospital.
That was that time?
With high blood pressure
Okay.
and
All
other
right.
issues. But it was, because there was a lot of people involved. It got out there that there was this potential entity and this potential. And other folks came in and started.
It was a bit of a scrum, right? I mean, you had.
It was a scrum.
You had multiple strategics who wanted to get the deal. You had at least two, maybe more venture firms that I know of that were scuffling for it.
Well, not only that, but like if you think about it, the early iterations of what we were doing, and the interest with pharma it started before that, even with how do we get this funded? Because we were doing this with startup and cushion money that we found at places, and we could redirect, and that was the big questions. And I think the goal, I think initially, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, but was to fund it in the lab, not to start a company or even get money for it. I think we made the right decision in the end, but we could have went a different way for sure.
Jury's still out, right? You got to see how the current team does. Well, I joking aside, it made a big impression on me when I was first meeting you, and we were talking about maybe working together. That was after you made the decision, and Versant had come in with some money.
You weren't an easy fish to catch.
I'm a skeptic. No, but it was. I still to this day I'm sort of struck by the responsibility you've handed us, and the obligation I think that we have, right, to make good on what you all patiently created, right? I think it's one thing if something just sort of lands in your lap, but there's an intentionality and a purpose that you've given us that I really I feel an obligation to see through, and so I think you gave us a gift in that, right? The whole team knows the story and knows that this was sort of meant to be something bigger, and it's a motivator for us, so I appreciate that.
I mean, you guys are the ones making it happen. You took the risk, you had the vision, you helped us scrap up a good team, and they're the ones that have industrialized the platform and taken it to heights that we would have just never been able to pursue, at least in the academic setting, and it's working. It's working really well.
You have remained actively involved in the company, maybe not daily, but weekly, and sometimes more. Talk a little bit about that, because this is, again, your first time co-founders, and so all of this is new, and you're trying to find your way and figure out like what's our role and how do we contribute. What's that been like, and how do you think about being part of something that's now 2 years old and almost 60 people, and a number of kind of indicators that it's going well, but you've been a part of all that.
It's been awesome for me. I started work. This was a platform that was kind of a pipe dream starting as a grad student that I was able to kind of get early progress in as a postdoc, but no, altogether was working on somewhere around 10 years before we were able to get to kind of this point. And so it really is kind of like, my little intellectual baby in a way. What this partnership has kind of enabled our lab, through research agreements and things, to keep pushing the boundaries of the technology and some of the biology we explore. Yep. And it's nice that we're able to still contribute and feedback to Belharra, while they're busy pursuing, trying to actually make drugs. We're able to push the frontiers a little bit more, and it's again a nice synergy that feeds back.
From a biology perspective, I was just happy that these guys would agree to work with me.
Yeah.
In the early days, and then, I still enjoy working with them to this day on various different things. Him and Ben, and so, then to sort of have this extension and kind of see. I mean, it helps that a lot of the people came out of these labs that I already know a lot of these folks, which is great, and they're well-oiled machines. But to be able to kind of, and I think for me I do like a little challenge. Like, it's nice to see things not always work, then they work, and that's kind of science, right? And so, seeing a company through from the beginning, it's a different beast than a lab, running a lab, because it's, there's more of a finite runway, and but it's very similar, right? You raise money, you do research, you build value, and you move on, and so.
And you got to make it work.
Yeah,
right?
you got to make it work, and so, I think that in that sense, the time frame's a little bit more collapsed than academia, but it's actually like a challenge. You kind of, you take, and we failed a lot. I mean, as scientists, that's
Absolutely.
kind of what you deal with. So, it's helped also cheerleading folks on. Yeah. Hey, it's okay. Like, let's get up and do the next one.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's been sort of, we do it in my lab all the time, but it's like having another extended lab family, which is fun.
So first-time co-founders, and you realized that you wanted to build something, and you were getting sort of good advice from Ben. And walk me through the sort of thought process of saying, hey, let's go and add maybe a couple more folks to this mix to sort of join the party and bring some different things to the table. How did that conversation go, and how did you end up with Ben and Stuart?
Yeah, I think being at Scripps, developing a chemical proteomic platform, company, and having done the initial technology development in Ben's lab, it was kind of just a natural.
Somehow Ben came to mind. Yeah.
Pretty natural progression.
Yeah.
And Stuart's kind of like my academic grandfather. My graduate PI trained in his lab.
Okay.
And so I obviously.
I don't think I remember. Okay, no, that's right.
It's very important to us.
Our lineage.
Yeah.
And so obviously there's a familiarity and looking up to his career and him as an innovator in our field. And Ben, I know, is close friends with Stuart, and so he just kind of pitched this idea of, hey, we should, if he's interested, we should try bringing him in as well. And it's just kind of a no-duh. Yeah. Right. Obviously, we would have loved to have him there. And so it's, he's kind of a beacon for, and not only a validation for things, but it gives us him and Ben give us street cred, but they're a beacon for talent. That validation means a lot to the outside world, and then you see he involved Ben is every day. He's on top of you guys. Yeah. Not only for the science, but also strategy and things.
Totally.
And he has a very unique experience and skill set with Vividian and Abide and ActiveX, all chemical proteomic platform companies. And so he's kind of the only one in the world you would ever want. If you're doing a chemical proteomic company, he's probably the only one in the world you would ever want in your corner.
Well, and I appreciate the fact that all four of you hold us to such high standards, right? You all operate your labs that way. Those are your track records and your publications and all the rest. But it's in the same way that I think what part of what you gave us was high expectations that we need to make something of this, and that this is something much bigger than a program or two. I think that this company is the best set of co-founders in terms of both what you bring to the table and how you bring it to the table, and the quality and the quantity. So I think we're extremely lucky. So share where you kind of hope Belharra is when you kind of look down the road. If you had a vision for us that say 5 years from now, what do you hope it'll be by that point?
successful, whatever
that alive
means.
and kicking.
Alive and expanded. I really do think this is the ultimate platform company for small molecule drug discovery. It literally is the only way it is the universal way to find what's druggable and to find chemical leads in drugs for what is druggable. It's hard to envision anything else as enabling as what has been built here. In 5 years, I hope we have a number of lead programs and things in the clinic.
John, anything you'd add to that?
No, I think you just want to see, the folks in the company have fun with the work and put all they have into it.
Yeah.
And it's hard to predict what you're going to see. Yeah. And I'm excited for that. I'm excited for the unknown.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think it also does, I agree with you, Chris. I think the potential of this platform is undeniable. I think it actually puts greater pressure on the choices you make, right? And I think that's where both you come in a big way, is helping us make good choices, right? Because if you're getting this many interesting starting points, where do you focus, right? And a serious danger to a company like this is you don't, right? And you end up sort of splitting your attention in too many directions. You try and keep too many pots bubbling, and so I think this is execution risk is actually one of our highest risk factors here, and so nailing it is actually going to be sort of one of our biggest. So anyway, that's where I think it's particularly helpful.
It's a very unique problem to have.
Got to ask about the hat, because we got Padres, but in Phillies colors. So how do you balance the duality of your fandom?
It's tough. I mean, first I want to say I wear the hat all the time, and everybody knows me by the hat, and I've even gotten my colleagues like Ben and others.
I think your hat on the web.
Start wearing hats, and so it's now I made it cool to wear hats in a certain way.
You're a fashion
trendsetter.
Yeah, I'm a fashion trendsetter. Not really, but I don't, And so I've been in San Diego for 14 years, and so I'm a big baseball fan. I played baseball. It's the sport I really played hard when I was young and really liked, so that my dad got me to play. And so we go to games. Yeah. And the Phillies aren't always playing the Padres, although they did last year in the playoffs, and that was fun. But so I have the Padres hat and I have a Phillies hat, and I usually wear the Phillies hat when I go see the Phillies play the Padres. But then when I go see other teams play the Padres, I wear the Padres hat. But now I've been here. I mean, it was interesting. I was talking to Ben about this the other day. I said, it's funny. I've been in San Diego. The only place I've been longer was growing up at home, 18 years, and now I'm here 14, you're going on 15. And so it starts to become home. Yeah. Like really home. Yeah. So, it's been tough to make a decision on that. They're both, well, this one's red. Right. The Padres aren't normally red, but I bought the red one. Yeah. Try to stay as close to home as possible.
I got it. Kind of wearing two hats. Hey guys, thank you so very much for all you did to get Belharra going, for all you're doing to keep us going, for the future we're building together, and for taking time today. Really do appreciate it. So thank you both.
Cool.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah. Thanks.